And we're good to go. Good morning, one and all. It's Monday, March 20th. This is actually the beginning of week 10. So we are moving along rapidly towards the conclusion of the class. In keeping score, well, let's go take a look. Let's go take a look here and see what we see coming up. We have assignment 7 coming up this week. More about that in a moment. Keeping score, the project 2 that was due yesterday, I received 3 submissions for them. I think I've graded 2 of them and they were okay. And the final project check-in, which was also due, I received only 2 submissions. So I'm going to send out a reminder about that. There's also something in the final project thing that's really, I think, my fault for not emphasizing, which was a proposal discussion topic. So I'm not going to grade that one as late because it kind of went by and I didn't push it. But I'll ask those of you who have approved final projects, present company included, to submit a thing into a discussion group, comment on 2 others, and you show up, you get 100. So that's what we will do there. So let's talk a little bit about assignment 7. It's a follow-on assignment, follow-on to project 1. So for those 7 out of 15 who have done project 1, you have a starting point. If you're going to tackle assignment 7 and you haven't done project 1, you have to do project 1 probably first. So let's take some time and take a look at assignment 7. See what we can make out of it. I'm not sure that I could make everything out of what was here, but we'll give it a try. And I'll let you, of course, read this over in your leisure. As a matter of fact, I think what I'll do is I'll just summarize what I think is going on here and what I'm looking for. So this is heavily has to do with the section that we just completed on file I/O, particularly just plain ordinary text files. The problem we have with project 1 is that the information in terms of the menu was hard-coded into the program, which is a bad idea. And any ordering information just went away as the program finished. So this assignment asks you to fix both of those. Basically, your menu choices, and all that means is description or maybe line number, description, and unit price. That information has to come out of the program and has to be stored in probably a CSV file. Makes most sense because it looks like a spreadsheet. Each row in the text file can be, or each line in the text file can be a row of data, and then you'll have just 2 or 3 columns, depending if you want to put the line number in also, or just the description and the item. So however you decided to code your menu as data, if you rebuild that probably in a new function called something like read_menu or read_menu_file, rebuild that structure, now the rest of your program can be the same. So is that obvious that what I'm asking you to do there, or any questions about the CSV part of it? We're good so far? Mm-hmm. All right. So descriptions, unit prices come out of your code and are read in when the program kicks off from a CSV file that you create. Now, you don't have to create that CSV file using a program. You can just get in with Notepad or even in PyCharm and just type in the data for it. So on the output side, the instructions really ask you for 3 options. Obviously, we need some record of what we're doing. So as this says, the customers want a receipt The company that owns your restaurant wants you to keep track of these things. So the output needs to be saved, and they're going to give you three options: print a receipt to the screen, print a receipt to a file, or do both. So the best way of doing it that they're kind of hinting to here is write a new function to print to the screen, another one to print to the file, and then you have an option of calling one, the other, or both. Now, the output needs to say what? Well, it should say when the order was placed. It should say how many items were ordered. It does not have to say, it should not say what items were not ordered. If the customer kind of punks out on you and doesn't order anything, no reason to create a receipt. So the receipt shows what has been ordered, how many, probably unit price is not a bad idea for your own sanity, and then the extended price and also the total should appear on the receipt. So it should look like a receipt. When you print it to the file, it really makes more sense to append it to the file and just keep a running record of what orders have been placed today, we'll say. Whether or not you want a new file for each day, not so important. Let's just say that this will be the file of the day, and it will have a record of all the orders in terms of item, quantity, unit price, extended price, and total. So that's assignment 7. You'll also notice that we're rapidly running out of assignments. There is an assignment 8. Let me go back and take a quick look here and see what's left. There's an assignment 8 that I think is a pretty straightforward guizero issue. There's an extra credit that makes it much fancier. And there is project 3. That's also, I think, a pretty straightforward guizero project. We have another check-in for your final project, and then the project submission, and then there's a discussion. Whoops, there's a discussion thing that goes along with that. So we don't have a lot of things to do, but there's a lot of work to do. Obviously, the more advanced the projects and the assignments are, the more complicated they get. And the big thing hanging over us is the final project. So I can't emphasize enough for the 6 of you who have approved final projects. You probably have more work ahead of you than you realize, and it's going to take you longer to finish it than you think. And the work done on the weekend before it's due, not a great idea. So either in your mind or on a calendar, take a look. April 23rd, approximately a month from now, the end of week 14, that's when your final project must be submitted. That gives us a couple of days in week 15 to allow student comments and kind of tie up loose ends. Since we're beyond the point of snow days, we don't have that to catch up on. The other important thing about April 23rd is that all of your work that has not been submitted, that is not more than 3 weeks old, must be submitted by April 23rd. So if it's more than 3 weeks old, I'm sorry, I'm not interested in it anymore. If it's within that window, you must submit it at the end of week 14. And that keeps week 15 as a place where I can preserve some of my sanity, what's left of it, in that I don't have students trying to submit a whole semester's work in the last week of the class or the weekend after the class ends, which is worse. So the policy for all of the ITN 160 sections is basically everything is due at the end of week 14. So round it off, you have a month. And if it seems like a lot, it's not. You know, for those of you who are in the running to finish the class, there's still a bunch of work to be done. And, you know, please keep track both on this schedule, on this sheet, and also in the class schedule that's someplace in D2L. keep track of what's due when and where we are. Speaking of which, we are about to take a formal look, or a more formal look, at Module 10. That's also significant because if we come down here, we'll notice it's the last module that's listed here. So we have taken some previews into Module 10. It's worth reviewing some of that work and also making it into a more formal section, making sure you know what's available to you in D2L, what's available to you online in the guizero tutorial, kind of position the whole topic of graphical user interfaces and Python. So you kind of see where this fits into everything. And then what we want to do is we want to start working on more and more different kinds of guizero widgets and more complex applications. So it's really, so one of the instructors who retired a couple of years ago, she said that when she had something important to say, she just repeated it 3 times. I don't know how successful that is, but this is really important. In this section, you have lessons for whatever you make out of them. You know, I would recommend spending some time reading them, but you also have practices. The practices all have worked out code, usually with a video. So here today, we're going to talk about app and window widgets. Here's a practice for it. I wasn't crazy about the practice, so I did my own, but we'll get to that. Here's one on menu bars and push button widgets. I'm not a big menu bar fan, so I'm going to push that one off. But here's a practice. Boxes and sliders. I am a big fan. And here's a practice. Text and text box widgets. I think this is in the wrong place. It's a fundamental thing, so we'll be talking about that today. And here's a practice. Then hot off the press, here's a new section, and you can tell it was designed by me because it has no style at all. We actually, several weeks ago, looked at 2 guizero demo programs. Here they are with their code. We might take a quick look at them today as a refresher, and our focus today is going to be on demo program number 3. So what's the difference between a demo program and a practice program? The demo program is less formal, and I don't embellish it with a video and a lot of words. It's just there. It's a demo program. I try to do a decent job commenting it, but it's code available to you. So all of those things are there available to you. And you know, if you're having trouble with guizero, that's why we have this module, and that's why we have all the practice things here, to give you working code. Today, or maybe on Wednesday, depending on how the time goes, I do have a breakout exercise, so don't everybody log off at once. So far, it looks like there were 3 students there, which would be enough for 1 breakout room. Let's see how it goes. The exercise is relatively simple. And the importance to me, in my mind, of doing breakout exercises is it gives you a chance, number 1, to work with other students. Number 2, to ask me any questions you want. Number 3, I can give you whatever code I want to give you to help you get it done because it's a breakout. It's not an assignment. So I kind of expected in the breakout that there would be more questions and I'm stuck and please help and why isn't this working? So we will see how that works out. And I promise if we don't do it today, we'll do it on Wednesday. So let's kind of do, I guess, my version of the lesson. So we used to talk about UIs, user interface, and you know, people got paid to design user interfaces. And then it occurred to people that there's really two aspects to it, and they call the other aspect user experience. And then they called it UI UX, for user interface user experience. So UI is where you make your code functional. User experience is where you make it as aesthetic as you can. So you have, a nice colors, a nice layout. Things aren't too big, they aren't too small. Errors are explained. So it's making the thing into a comfortable user experience. And I think in that lesson, they give you some examples of less than perfect user experiences. As you start to work on guizero, you'll look at other apps, whether it be a mobile app or a computer-based app, and you'll grimace. You'll say, that is ugly, and why did they do it that way? And this is confusing. And you should be able to get a lot more critical of the user experience part of it. Now, if the user interface doesn't work, it doesn't matter how pretty it is. So UI is probably the first goal, and then user experience comes in after and needs to be refined. I've had several students over the years who are much better at user experience than I am. I'm a degreed engineer. That means I get it to work, and aesthetics, yeah, maybe. So, I've seen students do far superior user experience work than I do. Okay. So let's put this in context. And the context is graphical user interfaces. The name of this section is graphical user interfaces, not guizero. So where does this all fit? Some of this is historical perspective. Some of it is to kind of help you out in doing your projects. For those of you who begin to get the feeling that guizero is not the tool for you. So let me go through 6 different GUI systems that I know about in Python. And there are many more. And there are many others in other languages. So the first one is tkinter, T-K-I-N-T-E-R. The biggest advantage of tkinter is it's built into Python. You don't have to load anything externally. You have to import things, but it comes with Python. It's also way old, which means they have a lot of time to have worked out the bugs and a lot of time to add in different kind of widgets. That's the good news. The bad news is it's not the easiest graphical system to work with. You can't teach it at the beginning of a programming 1 class. You can teach it at the end. And, it could be easier, but it's good. The other thing you should be aware of is built on top of tkinter and built into Python is a whole other graphic subsystem called Turtle with a capital T. Turtle graphics has a long history that I'm not going to get into now, but it's a very, So who knows, who can give me a good definition of what a sprite is? Anyone?
A sprite is basically like a pixelated image of a object in
Yeah,
yeah,
it's a character,
yeah,
maybe.
a character like the yeah, so the yeah, and a character, an image or
Right.
of the character.
And it has a life as a character. So you can say, I have a sprite, its name is George, and I want George to run around in a circle. I want George to disappear. I want George to get bigger if he gets the food he needs, turn red if he gets blasted. So Turtle is a very sprite-oriented language. Simplistic, but you can create characters that look like turtles, duh, a little arrowhead, which is the default, a square and a circle, and I think that's it. But you can also take your geometric sprites. Well, you can take any of them, but let's say you take the square and you can stretch it into a rectangle. You can take your circle and stretch it into an oval. You can move it around. You can turn its orientation. There's a whole lot of things you can do with Turtle. So it's there. It just needs to be imported. Now we get guizero. Guizero is nothing but a wrapper around TK Inter. And I'm going to close my door because I have a noisy parrot. So the people who designed guizero basically said that TK Inter is too hard for, quote, young children, quote, to learn. It's too hard for anybody to learn from the beginning. So they intended to do things using 2K Inter, but making it easier to use. And I think they succeeded very well. And that's going to be our focus. We don't have enough time to focus on multiple systems. If you want to, as part of your final project, that's fair game. As long as I know that that's what you're doing. Next up is Pygame, which, needless to say, is a game-oriented GUI system. You might note that Pygame includes an audio player in it. So if you don't use Pygame to create a GUI, but you need it to play MP3 files, for instance, you can do that and you can look it up. Just was reading this morning, Pygame didn't make it to Python 3.11, and it's used for the annoying buzzer in our class, which we don't use anymore in the physical simulator. So the article I read this morning basically said that the people who maintained Pygame can no longer do it, and it's being turned over to a community edition that is compatible with 3.11 and will be where it grows. So fresh off the press. So you might not want to look up Pygame. You want to look up Pygame CE for Community Edition. PG0 is a wrapper for Pygame. And I don't know if it wraps the Community Edition or not, but it's something to look into. Then there are two others that get a lot of press, and I haven't used them. One is called PYQT5. I don't know why, and I don't know how to pronounce it. The other is called WX Python. And again, you'd have to read more about those. And then there are other things that are other wrappers, around these things. So there's plenty of approaches to doing it, and we're just going to focus on guizero. But feel free to explore. So let's talk about guizero. So here we have a link which is included at least once in D2L, maybe multiple times. You can Google guizero tutorial and you'll end up here. Now, if you're serious about writing guizero and you don't have this bookmarked, you're making a mistake. This website was put together by the people who authored guizero. There are no secrets. This is it. Everything that guizero does is described here. And it's not a hard website. It may not be a beautiful website, but it's not a hard website to navigate. So make sure you know this link one way or the other and use it. It knows more about guizero than I do. So this actually starts out in an about section. I've told you the about. Installation, we've done it already. Let's skip over this one right now and let's go to widgets. So this is the list of guizero widgets. There ain't no more. As a matter of fact, that doesn't even scroll. So from app to waffle, that's it. Oops, no, there's another one there. From app to window, that's it. So how many are there? I don't know, 15 or so. Any of these you can click on, like today I want to learn about push buttons. So I'm going to click that. And what I find is pretty consistent. This box up here shows you the initialization or the parameters. Remember functions, arguments, and parameters? This is the parameter list for push buttons. Some of the things like self, you can ignore this semester. You'll pay attention to next semester. The rest of these, some of them need values and have no default, like master. And some come with a default value, like pad Y, pad X. And you can change any of these that you want, usually by name in an argument. What is it? It creates a push button. How do I make one? Here's some code. How do I show an image instead of text? This is how. There are some wonky things having to do with Macs versus Windows that you might need to pay some attention to. Here is the parameter list. These are all the parameters, which they call starting parameters, but there are no other kind. Here's their name. So when I say command equals, it's because I looked it up here. Args equals. What is it? Well, command is the name of a function. Args must be a list. Is there a default? Not in that case. Here's pad X, pad Y. Again, it defaults to 10, and it requires an integer. Well, what does it do? Well, pad X determines how much horizontal padding is added, blah, 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 and pad Y is the vertical padding. So no secrets. These are the starting parameters. Methods. Methods are what you should call functions that are sitting inside of classes. And if that's confusing to you, don't worry about it. We're not going to have a vocabulary test. Notice that methods are all functions. They have parentheses. They're all in lowercase. This tells you about the arguments, and this tells you what the method does and whether or not it returns anything. Nothing here gets returned. So once you have an object, like an APP object, let's go back to the push button. Once you have a push button object, these are the functions or methods that are available to you. Properties are the other side of what you do with an object. So an object has certain properties. It's really important to notice that you can get and set these properties. What does that mean? That means the property can appear on either side of the equal sign. If it's to the left of the equal sign, you're setting it. If it's to the right of the equal sign, you're getting it. And that's all you have to do, is figure out, are you setting it or are you getting it? Use it appropriately. Don't use parentheses. Notice these are just names. Said another way, these are the nouns, if we want to make an English analogy. These are the verbs. These are the actions. These are the properties of it. Or maybe they're adjectives. Anyway, they're not verbs and they're not functions. And that's it. Sometimes there's another example down at the bottom, but that's pretty much what you're going to find in any of these things. So you really can't tell me that you don't understand how to use a combo widget, because all you have to do is go to the website and hit combo, read it, 10, 15 minutes of reading, and you'll be as big of an expert as I am in the combo widget. Some of the things that don't fit here ended up over here. We'll spend some time with these, but not necessarily today. So we will look at those. Recipes I've never really used, but feel free to look. And book is not a bad thing because you can't buy it anymore, but there's a free PDF. And in this book are 10 worked out examples. They tend to be gamey kinds of things because the original thinking is this was more for young people and young people want games, but it's worked out code in increasing complexity. So not a bad thing to take a look at, especially if you want to just browse and get more comfortable with what working Python programs look like. Feel free to steal code from this book. If it becomes a significant part of your program, you have to quote it. And obviously, we don't allow projects that are done in the book. You know, that would be silly. These are things that are already worked out. So that's, that's the highlight of this website. And I'm arguing with myself about what I want to do next. And I guess I've won the argument. And feel free, jump in with questions. How does it do this? Why doesn't it do that? Where can I go to find out about this or that? So what I want to do is I want to go back to our resources tab. And once again, I emphasize the word valuable. If you don't know what's in this tab, you're probably missing something valuable. And here is here's the Python 3 cheat sheet. I guess I don't see the link here to that page, but I promise you, if you Google guizero tutorial, you will get that page. I think we spoke about this already, but I think it's worth going back and reading it again because the rest of this semester is really focused on guizero. So what you want to do in this part of the course is you want to get comfortable following a procedure for doing your guizero programming. You can argue about whether or not this is good for any GUI environment. Some of it is, some of it's pretty specific. And actually, here's the link. If I hover over this, I should be able to click it. And there's your getting started. So this link will get you to the tutorial. So let's just go over this quickly. I think you've heard it before. And of course, you should be able to read at least as well as I do. Whether or not this is a homework assignment, a job assignment, something you're going to do on your own, you need to know what the mission is. So read the whole assignment twice. Not every other line. That's not what twice means. Read every word through the thing and go through it twice. This should create a shopping list for you. In your mind, you should have a pretty good idea of what Python tools and what guizero widgets you're going to need for the assignment. Some of which you may not know about or not know enough about. So make a list of what it is you need to learn more about. And specifically, if it's guizero related, use this link. This may be the most important part of this, in my opinion, and nobody agrees with me, so people tend not to do it, but I give the speech anyway. Take out a pencil and paper and sketch out your layout. Paper, pencil, and eraser. I'll add that. Sketch out your layout. It doesn't have to be pretty. On the sketch, you can label all of the GUI elements that are required. Conversely, if the labels are not required, don't add them. It just clutters things up. And we'll see examples of that. If you have to label something, it needs a unique name within your project. And I strongly recommend a naming convention. And the naming convention says take 3 characters, an underscore, and then describe what it is, except maybe for APP that I don't bother. So app widgets, window widgets, text widgets, etc., etc. These are my suggested leading 3 characters. It'll really help you find your named widgets because I know it's a button, but I forgot what I called it. Well, just type in BTN or BTN underscore, and PyCharm will give you a list. If you really hate doing this, don't do it. Now you should be able to think about what event handlers will be required. Unless you're creating a display that never changes, which maybe is possible, not good enough for a final project, but it's possible, you're going to have events. Well, what kind of events? Well, push button events are the most common. Other things naturally cause events like checkboxes and button groups and sliders. And waffles can cause events. Text widgets in general don't have events, and text boxes could, but it's usually not used that way. The other events that you can have that are worth mentioning now is there are keyboard events or key click events. You can create an event if you click any key on the keyboard. Okay, so my monitor decided to go out. Are you folks still seeing and hearing me?
Yes, we are.
Okay, and it just came back. That is strange. I wonder if the monitor is getting flaky on me. It's either the monitor or the video interface. Yeah. So the other event that you have is key click events, and the other two events that you have are time-based. And those we will see pretty quickly. So the two time-based events are dot after, which is just a delay. That's what you use instead of sleep. And dot repeat, that's a periodic time-based event. There may be some global constants and variables that need to be shared by functions. List them so you know what they're going to be. Define your layout. Now, this is just a layout. This is not the action. So get the layout and keep refining it until it's not too ugly. Now go and do your event handlers and make sure they do what they're supposed to do. This item is really important. Do not ever create your guizero widgets and event handlers, because every time the handler triggers, you're creating a new widget. It's not what you want to do. You want to create your widgets in the layout, and you want to modify them in the event handlers. So that's a mistake that's easy to make and will ruin your day. You may have other supporting functions that you need, create them. Test document, make things look pretty, go back and reread the assignment. Is everything done? So a lot of this sounds pretty, you're making a big deal out of nothing. I don't think it is. I think this is a reasonable roadmap to get you to where you want to be. And we'll try to talk about that as we go through it. Okay, so I guess we don't need this for a moment. Let's talk about containers. For better or worse, in this class, there's 3 different kinds of containers. There are code containers that hold lines of Python. You know you're looking at a code container if you see a colon at the end of the line. So that's an indication that this command requires a code container. You must have that colon at the end, and you must indent everything in the container. Data containers contain data. Duh. They're very well described in the Python 3 cheat sheet. We don't have that many of them. We have lists, tuples, dictionary sets, and sort of kind of strings, which look like a container of characters. Now we're going to talk about widget containers. They contain widgets. And there's only 3 of them in guizero. The concepts are the same in any of the others. The names will be different. So we've already seen a container. Now's not a bad time. Let's get back here and see if we can find our templates that we did ages ago. And let's look at a guizero template. That's not a bad place to start. So we need line 8. So we have guizero classes available to us. The classes give us access to the widgets. Classes always start with a leading capital letter. So here we're using the APP class, which in some ways works like a function, and we're using it to define an object called lowercase app. That's our first container. There must be one and only one of these in a guizero program. If you try creating multiple ones, 50% of the features work and 50% don't work of the widgets. And I know this by experience. So it's okay to have empty parentheses here. That's okay. The window that I don't think we've looked at, but we're going to look at today is called a window widget. It's how you create multiple windows in guizero. Ironically, it didn't exist in early versions of guizero, leading people to make a mistake and create multiple APP widgets. But after enough people complained, or they got enough people to work on it, we have a window widget. A window widget looks just like an APP widget. The only thing is that's how we create multiple windows. And the window widget, and actually every other widget, must specify a parent. The easiest thing to do, and there'll be an example coming up, the easiest thing to do is to make the parent of all of your window widgets your APP widget. In other words, APP becomes the root window. It has no parent, but it is the parent to all the subsequent windows. Again, we'll do an example. The last widget up that is a container is a box, and boxes are a little different. They're the only widgets that can be nested. So boxes within boxes are cool. Windows within windows, not cool. Boxes need a parent. If you define a box widget, you must specify a width and a height. It doesn't default, and it doesn't like one and not the other. It actually will still run, but it'll give you an error saying you need both. So boxes are a very convenient layout device. We'll see how they're used. There's another technique of laying things out called a grid. And after using it for a year or two, I decided I had suffered enough and moved over to using a box. So that's what we will do. Avoid using the grid. You're curious, read about the grid layout and try it out. So how are we going to get started? Well, this little template kind of gave us a clue. We're going to get started by looking at APP and looking at a couple of very, very simple widgets. One of them is going to be text, and all that does is display text. In general, it is not clickable. If there's just a label that we're putting out, we don't need a name. We can just put out this as basically a label that never changes. And then we must say app.display. If we don't, nothing happens. So this program does, of course, something very simple. It creates a default window of a default size with a default back color, with a default title and text in a default position, which is top to bottom, horizontally centered, and a default size, which is in general too small. So if you want to start with this template, not a bad place to start. So text labels or displaying results, text boxes, places to enter stuff, and push buttons, things that give you an action, things that support an action. So trying to keep track of how my time is going. And I think it's going to work out okay. I would encourage you to go back and look at these two demos. I don't think I want to take time right now because we have looked at them once. This is a demo that takes a waffle, which we'll talk more about in the future, and puts 4 colors alternating with the color in black into these 4 things. It uses the after method to create a delay. And it also, well, that's the only event. Notice we never click on this display. We bring the display up and it just does its thing. And it does its thing because we're scheduling time-based event handlers. So go back and review that. Couldn't hurt. What does this one do? This one does something that really is typical of your ag lab, but now you can do whatever you want. We have a slider. The slider represents temperature, At a certain point, the engine, this is supposed to be an automobile engine measuring coolant temperature, gets into a good or green range, and it stays that way to a certain point. And at that point, it goes into a red range. So check that one out if you'd like to remember how it worked. And let's spend some time on this. Let's see what this does. And admittedly, this suffers from a case of the sillies, but that's okay. So create two windows, no big deal. I don't need to tell the user that the first window is the APP window and the second is a window. I just give it whatever title I want, and I chose window 1, window 2. In each window, there is a named text field. Initially, this one says click the other button. This one says click this button. There also is a named push button. This push button says don't click me. This one says click me. For those of you who don't like following instructions, the don't click me push button comes up initially as disabled. So I can sit here and click for the whole day and nothing's going to happen. So eventually I will find out that, or figure out that I'm supposed to click this button. When I do, this one becomes disabled. The text changes to say click the other button. This one becomes enabled. The text in the button says click me, and this says click this button, and that's it. I probably should have made these buttons the same size, but not important. Something magic happens when I close this. What happens by magic is both windows go away. On the other hand, if I close this does not go away. And that's important to realize. That's what we're talking about this master or parent relationship. As I said before, unfortunately, master is now no longer a politically correct name because some of these concepts of a master combined it with master slave, which is even worse. So parent-child is a much better concept, a much better name to pick, although concept is the same. So what have we done here? Not a very big program. And, maybe 50% of the program is actually set up. So I'm going to do what I usually do in going over these programs. I'm going to ignore the event handlers for right now. And let's see what's left. Well, I have a header because I know I lose points if I don't put a header into my program. I have an import statement, which is from the template, from guizero, import everything. And now I start thinking about what things what am I going to need in this program? And do I want to make them into a global constant? So global constants, good. Global variables, think about whether or not that's the right way to do it. If it really is a global constant, I should write the name of the variable because Python doesn't really know the difference. I should write it in uppercase. That's an indication to everyone that I'm defining a constant. Python, on the other hand, couldn't care less. So I want my two windows to be the same height and width. So I'm going to define some global constants for that. I know I have two different messages. One is click the other button and the other is click this button. So I'm going to call those message 1 and message 2. And I've decided I want to change the text inside the button. So one of them is don't click me, the other is click me. So with these in hand, it's going to make my layout easier. Let's look at the layout. Create an APP widget. The name of the widget is lowercase app. Set the title to window 1. Set the height to the global constant height and the width to width. So that means I don't have to write the number twice. I can write it once, and if I want to change it, it's up at the top. As I said, the text size comes out a little small. I think it's either 10 or 12 by default. So I'm going to make APP text size, which is a property. So no parentheses, and it appears on the left of an equal sign, so I'm setting that property to 16. Questions, just shout them out. Don't let a question go unanswered. It will move around in your brain and get you frustrated and unhappy, as opposed to having the question answered now, which will make you happy and in a better frame of mind for absorbing new material. So, comment, create a root window. Root is the same as parent or master. Now that I've done that, let's create a second window. Well, I can't use APP again because, trust me, bad things will happen. So I have to use a window widget. It and every other window, it and every other guizero widget must know the parent. Or if you want to be whatever about it, who's my daddy? There has to be a parent. And that's APP typically. So this is not optional, this is required. And if I hover over the word window, I'll get the same pop-up that I saw in the guizero tutorial, and it's telling me that master is required, and these are optional. So I decided to set the title to window 2 and the height and width to be the same as this. Okay, so this is pretty boring. We have a text widget. Its name happens to be txt_msg_1, not monosodium glutamate, whatever it is, but message. What is it? It's a text widget. This is its name. It's going in APP, and the text comes from the global variable up here. So the text that goes in there is message 1. No biggie. What about this widget? This goes in Win. So as I said, window widgets are with GUI containers. You want to put it in another window, another guizero container. Well, just find a valid name. So this is going in APP. This is going in Win. This has one message. This has the other message. And we're going to now do the same thing for the push buttons. Call them BTN1, BTN2. They're both push button widgets. That's the class that creates them. This is the name given to the widget. Now, names must be unique. This one goes in APP. This one goes in WIN. This has the text 1. This has text 2. This one is declared to be disabled. This one is declared to be enabled. This one says if push button 1 is ever pushed, which no one's going to force you, call the function named toggle_1. This does not say that. This says when this line is executed, call the function toggle1. That's not what you want to do. So PyCharm is going to try to give you those parentheses, take them out. And this says register that function name with this push button. And this gives you the name of the function to execute. Otherwise known as an event handler. Otherwise really just a function. But it's a special function. It's a function hooked up to be an event handler. That's what is the secret behind line 59. Line 59 does much more than just display the APP widget. It also displays any children of it, and it starts a loop to listen for events. That's why you don't execute any guizero code after line 59, because until the display is closed, this is in a loop. So let's see where we are. I can look at these two windows for the rest of my life, and they'll never change. Why? Because there are no events. So I'm not forced to execute events. Something interesting here. Notice APP text size is 16. Well, what about WIN text size? Seems to be the same, doesn't it? Somebody say yes.
Yes, it does.
Yes. By magic? I don't think so. I don't believe in magic. It's because this is the child, and as it is child of APP, it inherits certain properties like text size, text color. Those properties are inherited to the children, child or children. And now maybe you understand why when I X this window out, the child goes away. When I X this window out, the child has no more parent. This is a sob story. The child dies along with the parent because there must be a parent. A link is made in guizero from the parent to all of the children. And if that goes away, then so does the children. Sad, but true. All right, we have a few minutes before the break, and that's just enough time to discuss event handlers. So I wrote all of this code without writing an event handler. I don't want to do that first. I want to get my layout straight. And maybe I want to say up here in a comment, create the layout. Oops. And this is how I do it. I create a root window, a second window, 2 text widgets, and 2 push buttons. And I don't forget app.display. This is now textable. This is now displayable. And the ability here to make this pretty, like maybe I want separate colors or something for these. That's easy. Now I need to worry about my event handlers. Well, there's 2 of them. And maybe there shouldn't have been 2 of them because they look pretty close to each other. But I was in a rush, and I thought maybe you'd appreciate seeing them as separate. So when does this happen? This happens when I hit push button 1. I execute this. Well, what do? I disable button 1. I enable button 2. I make this the text of button 1. I make this the text of button 2. I change the text widget's value to message 1, the text 2 widget value to message 2. And my function is done. Python doesn't require a return statement. This returns nothing, but you don't need a return in there. Well, what about toggle 2? If you look at it, it's obvious. I flip these 2 around. Enable this, disable that. This is text 2, this is text 1, this is message 2, message 1. So in other words, I toggle both the enable, disable state. I toggle the button text, which is a property of a button. And I toggle the value of a text widget, which is a standard property of the text widget. You're going to make this mistake, because I still do sometimes. You're going to say, okay, I want to change the text to message 1. And PyCharm says, what are you doing here? You're killing me. This doesn't make sense. It looks like you're changing the widget. And that's not what I want to do. I want to change the value property of that widget. And if I just type a dot, I'll see the properties and I'll also see the methods. These are the things without parentheses. These are the things with parentheses. And if I'm so inclined, I can double click them. And that's why this program does this. It displays 2 windows. This button starts out disabled, so I can click it forever and nothing happens. There is no event. Because the button is disabled, there is no event. The only event in this app is this button right now. And when I click it, I change text, I change message, and I disable this button. Now the only event thing that causes an event is up here. And I named these window 1, window 2, because I don't want to bother whoever uses this program to know that this is the APP window and this is the other window. And if I had more time, I might think about, can I get an event to trigger based on closing this that would also close this, and then they wouldn't know the difference between which is the parent, which is the child. All right, I've talked myself into exhaustion. Any questions? Give me some feedback. Pretty easy, I get it. Or, I have no idea why I'm seeing what I'm seeing, or makes a little bit of sense, but I need to look at it some more.
May need to look at it a little more, but so far so good.
All right. Any of the 2 other students who are available have?
No, I agree. Just need to look at it more.
Okay, and I don't know who the 3rd student is because I haven't looked lately. Hello, 3rd student.
Yeah, it'll be the same for me.
There you go. It's Walt. Okay, so great time for a break. We will get back at 10:10. And I'm pretty sure we have enough stuff here to do our breakout room. And that means I don't have to talk continuously. And you have 40 minutes at least to work in the breakout room. So I'll just set up a breakout room for the 3 of you, and I'll give you the assignment when we get back from the break. So we'll resume the recording for a few moments. So here's the here's the breakout assignment. Create a little window, mostly square, that has text unclickable. This is enter temperature below. This over here is a text box where you can type. So one would expect that you're going to type a temperature in there. A push button, that is the only event that we have here. And when you hit the push button, it takes a look at this temperature and it breaks it up into these ranges and says the today's forecast is for mild weather. So let me make this a little bigger. Roll it down. Let's put this back here. And that's all it has to do. So we haven't spoken a lot yet about these text boxes. You might want to look those up. I will tell you that these widgets, when you read their value, you get a string, whether or not there's a number in there or not. In other words, it's a lot like an input statement. So if you want it to be treated as a number, you need to use either an int or a float function, and there's no reason you can't do that. So I suggest that when you get the value of that widget, you pass it to the float function to get a number. And don't worry for today about, how to deal with this. You should know that that will cause an exception, which I'll bet it does. There you go. And we're not going to deal with that right now. Could not convert string to float, tree. Yes, this is true. All right. So I'm going to give you this table up here. And basically it says divide up the temperature range into a couple of different things and display this text in different colors. I would go for the text first and the colors second. So, you start with cold, chilly, mild, warm, and hot. I, of course, don't really care about these ranges. The template that we saw before is not a bad starting place. And that's kind of the plan. So any questions about what the assignment is? Anything you're concerned about? Sounds optimistic. Okay. So let's stop.